Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Ba'ishim, Barakah Kodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I'm going to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Ba'ishim, Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to Ya'akim out there pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the Brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off with Daniel chapter 2, verse 40 to 42. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, the legs of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, which is the pagan Roman Empire. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And this is the last leg of that fourth kingdom, of the fourth beast, the reincarnated Roman Empire, which is that EU-NATO alliance, and the U.S. is a part of NATO. The United States is the chief player in NATO, and the U.S. is also known as Babylon the Great in the scriptures, the whore upon many waters. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, NATO, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and that miry clay is the EU or the European Union. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And very shortly, this fourth kingdom is going to be completely broken because Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai is beginning to visit you Edomites, or so-called white people, for all the wickedness you've committed on this planet ever since you came into that little season of your final rulership beginning with the Renaissance. And your chief offense is for touching the apple of the Most High's eye, the true children of Israel, who are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai is beginning to put the curses of Deuteronomy 28 on you Edomites, and there's nothing you can do to escape them. This is Deuteronomy 30, verse 7. And Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies, chiefly you Edomites, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And one of the main curses that Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai is putting on you Edomites is the curse in Deuteronomy 28, verse 54. So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. And what I want to focus on is where it says his eye shall be evil toward his brother. These Edomite nations globally don't trust each other. The U.S. doesn't trust the EU, which is why they're putting a lot of trade sanctions and tariffs on them. The EU doesn't trust the U.S. because the U.S. keeps meddling in their business affairs, dealing with Russia and China. NATO doesn't trust the U.S. because they're getting tired of the U.S. dragging them into all these foreign wars. The U.S. doesn't trust NATO because NATO's not covering their share of the cost for the alliance, etc., etc. And as it says in Mark chapter 3, verse 24 to 25, and if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And the division of the last leg of the fourth kingdom is going to culminate in all these nations being dragged down into the Middle East for that battle of the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or that War of Armageddon, where all the United States' allies in NATO are going to turn against her and ally themselves with nations like Russia and China. And together, they're going to shoot 200 million nuclear missiles onto the United States of America, turning it into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate wasteland afterwards. And in this video, I've got an article and a video documenting this fourth kingdom being divided and falling apart. And the article is on activistpost.com, and the title reads, U.S. enraged after 6 more EU nations that miry clay join Instex to bypass Iran sanctions. The kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And this plays into Revelation 17, verse 16. And the 10 horns, which is the EU, which thou sawest upon the beast, NATO, these shall hate the whore, the United States of America, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire, the fire from those nuclear-tipped ICBMs. And we're seeing the beginning stages of this right now with these 6 EU nations bypassing the U.S. to still do business with Iran. And I did a video last week dealing with the U.S.'s allies starting to turn against her. And one of the main reasons is that Iranian nuclear deal. These European nations want to continue to do business and have peace with Iran because they don't want to get dragged into a war with Iran, which they know will become a larger regional war and possibly World War III, which is all going to happen. That battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And it's the United States of America and the State of Israel who are the main culprits behind trying to sabotage the Iranian nuclear deal because they want a war with Iran and they want to convince these European nations to join an alliance with them to go to war against Iran. On Friday, 6 European countries issued a bombshell joint statement declaring their intent to join INSTEX, or the Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges, a European special purpose vehicle serving as a swift alternative to bypass U.S. sanctions on Iran. Finland, Belgium, Denmark, Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden, the 10 horns, because except for Norway, these countries are a part of the European Union, released a joint statement asserting it's of the utmost importance to the preservation and full implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, on Iran's nuclear program by all parties involved, i.e., we don't want a war with Iran. In light of the continuous European support for the agreement and the ongoing efforts to implement the economic part of it and to facilitate legitimate trade between Europe and Iran, we are now in the process of becoming shareholders of the Instrument in Support of Trade Exchanges, INSTEX, subject to completion of national procedures, the statement reads. INSTEX is an initiative set up by France, Germany, and the UK, also a part of the 10 horns, in January 2019 to provide humanitarian and sanctions relief to Iran after in November 2018, the SWIFT network suspended Iranian banks under Washington's pressure months after Trump pulled the U.S. out of the nuclear deal, that little horn in Daniel chapter 7, whose look was more stout than his fellows, who tries to control everything and boss his own allies around. Though the new alternative financial device had shaky beginnings amid further aggressive threats from the U.S. Babylonian administration, it continued through a trial phase, even though Tehran officials had complained it appeared too little too late. But now, as this latest 6-country statement announces, it will serve as the European vehicle to facilitate legitimate trade between Europe and Iran, while also providing incentive for Tehran to return to its commitments under the JCPOA, specifically to recently breached uranium enrichment limits. Upon the announcement, U.S. Ambassador Richard Grenell lambasted the move, saying, "Terrible timing. Why fund the Iranian regime while it's killing the Iranian people and shutting off the internet? You should be standing for human rights, not funding the abusers." You American Edomites got a lot of nerve. How many human rights abuses have you committed across this planet? Does the war with Iraq, the war in Libya, the Syrian civil war, or the war in Afghanistan ring a bell? How many people have you killed across this planet, especially in the United States of America, gunning down the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans? And you American Edomites are also trying to heavily censor the internet by repealing net neutrality and putting up all those new guidelines on YouTube, which is coming after the men of the Lord to try to take this word off the internet because we're revealing too much of your dirty dealings. It's pretty much saying the same thing. Specifically, he called out a tweet by Norway's ambassador to Iran, hailing the news of multiple Scandinavian countries joining the nuclear deal saving initiative. As the U.S. officials' tweet reveals, the White House is using the latest weeks-long protest and government-ordered internet blockage inside Iran to keep up the pressure and focus on a human rights narrative amid the security forces' crackdown. Despite the criticism and what will no doubt be a continued flood of U.S. official anger in response to the news, France said it asserts European autonomy amid an overreaching Washington administration. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian called it an important decision that will show Europe's autonomy of action. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. A house divided against itself cannot stand. You shall have an evil eye toward your brother. Just one example of this fourth kingdom falling apart. And now I'm going to go to this video
Tonight, President
by
Trump
RT America titled, Hear Macron Reveal Harsh Truth About NATO. Infighting amongst NATO. That part iron is starting to show its cracks.
is in London, as aforementioned, talking to European leaders about NATO. Mr. Trump first paid a visit to the royals, including a meeting with the future King of England. He met with Prince Charles. He met with his wife Camilla at Buckingham Palace. And then it was on to 10 Downing for a reception with NATO leaders from throughout Europe. Mr. Trump first met with, foremost, with NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg. Then he met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Say no to NATO. The tin horns and the beast hating the whore and burning her with that fire.
However, the big newsmaker was Mr. Trump's meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, where the two men sparred. Macron said something interesting in this meeting. I don't know if anybody else caught this, but I was monitoring it, sitting in my office, and I found this really fascinating when Macron said this. He suggested to Mr. Trump that the real problem with NATO comes down to this question. And he said it. He looked over at Mr. Trump and said these words. Who is our enemy today? That's what he said. He looked at Trump and said, who is our enemy today? Think about that. The leader of one of NATO's founding countries, France, is questioning publicly for the whole world to see and hear, for what reason does NATO still exist today?
As I said earlier, these European Edomites are sick of getting dragged into these foreign wars by you American Edomites.
Because that's really what he was asking, no? With more on this, let's turn over to RT correspondent Alex Mihailovich. He's been following this story for us. What do you make of that? Did that question or that comment strike you as much as it did me as you were listening to that news conference between these two world leaders, Alex?
Well, did it strike me at the same time, whether the French are the ones that are pushing about talking about Russia when it comes to who's the enemy of NATO.
Right.
Really, who is the enemy of NATO, right? So that is a great question. And this is what's happening. This is sort of a pattern that we saw during this summit, starting with Macron. These people are showing disappointment in the organization, in their membership in the alliance. So Macron saying, really, with the bottom line there, what is our strategy?
Mm-hmm.
A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand.
What is our strategy? Who do we fight? Who are we fighting? How do we fight terrorists? How do we fight terrorists when one day we're fighting alongside the Kurds and the next day one of our NATO members is fighting the Kurds? So strategy is a big key.
Groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and a lot of these other so-called Islamic terrorist groups are nothing more than proxy mercenary forces for the elites, the United States of America, and the State of Israel to wreak havoc in these other countries for geopolitical gains. Those boogeymen, so to speak.
There. The second factor here that many are talking about, including President Trump, is money. Who's pulling their weight in this organization? And he's complaining about that constantly, and for good reason. Look, out of all the countries, when it comes to military funding, the U.S. makes up 70% of all military funding in NATO. Now, to be fair, the U.S. is the biggest buyer of military equipment on the face of this planet. So obviously the numbers are going to be different. But when you go to NATO specifically, 22% of the NATO budget, which includes clerical, which includes summits, which includes all these different things, those numbers, so 22% the U.S., and then up to 25% would be France, UK, and Germany all together. So you see that the Americans are actually pulling more weight than anybody else there. Now,
as I also said earlier, this is a reason why these American Edomites have an evil eye towards their European brothers. They're sick of pulling most of the weight of NATO and paying up most of the funds.
Also, we're talking about disappointments here. Well, there's some people that are quite happy with NATO. That would be the UK's Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, for one. Here he is.
This is one of the most successful alliances in military history. Nothing like it in the last 500 years in terms of the peace that it has delivered. The UK is at the heart of it. We're the second biggest military player in NATO, and it's a great advantage to this country.
Even the UK in that final hour is going to turn against the United States of America. This is Jeremiah chapter 50. I'm going to start at verse 12. And this chapter is dealing with Babylon the Great, the United States. Your mother shall be sore confounded. She that bare you shall be ashamed. And who did the 13 colonies come out of? Great Britain. Behold, the hindermost of the nations shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Because of the wrath of Yahweh, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Every one that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished, and hiss at all her plagues. Put yourselves in array against her, against Babylon round about. All ye that bend the bow, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against Yahweh. All these nations shooting their nuclear missiles, those arrows, on to Babylon the Great, turning it into that biblical lake of fire, and then that desolate wasteland afterwards. When you jump up to verse 9, for lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations, not just the U.S.'s allies in NATO, but also the U.S.'s enemies, such as China, North Korea, Iran, you name it, from the North country, Russia, who they're all going to gather behind, and they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence she shall be taken. Their arrows, their nuclear missiles, shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain. They're all going to hit their targets.
Okay, NATO's never had to defend itself from anything, so we don't know really how good it is at that. Maybe it's deterrent. It could be deterrent. You know, we have a lot of member states here, so that could be the big thing here. But really, what has NATO done to date? They've attacked sovereign nations such as Serbia and Libya and Iraq, who were no threat to any NATO countries whatsoever. But is NATO discussing this? No, they have more important things to talk about, like dysfunction within NATO, and of course, underfunding. Two hot topics that Macron was talking about. Here's President Macron of France.
I know that my statements created some reactions, shake a little bit. A lot of people, I do stand by. And I have to say, when you look at what NATO is and should be, first of all, this is a burden we share. And President Trump just reminded you some figures, and the fact that this is perfectly true, that the US overinvested decades after decades, and it is number one by far. And I do share the statement. That's why I'm a strong supporter of a stronger European component in NATO, which is exactly what we are doing.
So here we see some infighting. We know that there's infighting in NATO, obviously. President Trump was really critical of the French president's harsh words. He even called NATO brain dead at one point. Macron also tried to make it clear that, you know what, NATO does have one thing it needs to do, that's clear up ISIS. But Trump's comments here, he is talking about Europe, France, and ISIS. This is a good one.
We have a tremendous amount of captured fighters, ISIS fighters over in Syria, and they're all under lock and key, but many are from France, many are from Germany, many are from UK. They're mostly from Europe, and some of the countries are agreeing. I have not spoken to the president about that. Would you like some nice ISIS fighters? Yeah, I can give them to you. You can take everyone you want.
There he is, Trump punching away. Are we going to go back to freedom fries and freedom toast? Just maybe, because Trump doesn't like the French very much. He's also talking about, you know what, he's saying, you know what, this is not just about NATO. Trump is making a point of talking about trade here. He's saying that he's going to be punishing the French, taxing their wine. He's saying Europe has treated America unfairly, and it's time that that deal is settled as well. America wants, a better deal with Europe when it comes to trade.
That little horn whose look was more stout than his fellows. This is Daniel 7, verse 19 to 20. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, the last leg of that fourth beast, the reincarnated Roman Empire, part iron, part clay, the EU-NATO alliance, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, the EU, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, that little horn, the United States of America, and those 3 that fell before is Britain, France, and Spain, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows, whose look was more proud, more obstinate, more stern, more confrontational than his fellows. Oh, you don't want to do what we say? Why don't we send some nice ISIS fighters to you? Oh, you want to do business with Russia and China? Why don't we throw some trade sanctions and tariffs on you?
As well. And as the town barker in the circus once said, let the games begin. Thank you, Alex Mihailovich. Very comprehensive. Good report.
That's pretty much it with that video. These are very beautiful times we're living in, Akim. We're seeing the downfall of our enemies, and it's inevitable. As Yahushua said in Matthew chapter 13, verse 16 through 17, but blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you, that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see, and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear, and have not heard them. And this was Yahushua speaking to the apostles, seeing the first coming of the Messiah, but he's also speaking to the men of the Lord today. How blessed are we to see the downfall of our chief enemy Esau, Edom, the fall of the heathens, and the second coming of the Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. So this should put a fire in you brothers' spirit to do whatever you can to make your calling and election sure, and push this word as hard as you can. Because the times are evil and short, and before you know it, all hell's about to break loose, and we're going to be knee-deep in Jacob's trouble, and we're definitely going to need that protection of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua to get through it. So with this video, I hope you sincere Akim were edified, and as always, I'm going to say a Baba Bol, Kwam Yasharala. Till next time, Shalom.